Continuing on the 11th order, next bill for consideration, Senate Concurrent Resolution 4009. Mr. Secretary.
Senate Concurrent Resolution number 4009, a concurrent resolution to create and enact a new section to Article 1 of the North Dakota Constitution relating to the inalienable right of life for every human being at every stage of development.
Senator City.
Mr. President, Senate Concurrent Resolution 4009 creates a new section in Article 1 of the North Dakota Constitution. The wording will go to a vote of the people in the next general election. The wording is simple. The inalienable right to life of every human being at any stage of development must be recognized and protected. Article 1 of the North Dakota Constitution is called the Declaration of Rights. In Section 1, it talks about all individuals being naturally, by nature, equally free and independent and have certain inalienable rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty. In Section 2, it says, government is instituted for the protection, security, and benefit of the people. In other words, the first duty of government, according to our North Dakota Constitution, is the protection of the people. The words of the Declaration of Independence remind us that our Creator God has endowed every human being with some inalienable rights, rights that go above and beyond those granted by government. We have these rights, and they enumerate only a few: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But we have other inalienable rights: to family, to children, to faith, because God, who made us, wrote these rights on every human heart. The right to life is not diminished by age or gender or abnormality, nor is it diminished by weakness or illness or incapacity. Government has no right to abridge the inalienable right to life. In fact, when we look at history, we can understand much about the culture of a people by how they treated the weakest in their midst. Throughout the history of this country, we have had many instances of denying basic human rights to categories of people. At our founding, Black people were only counted as 3/5 of a person. Later, American Indians were not considered persons under the law. It wasn't until the beginning of the last century that women were finally considered persons and were able to vote and hold office. 40 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that the unborn weren't persons. Justice Harry Blackmun wrote in the Roe v. Wade decision, if the suggestion of personhood of the unborn is established, the case, of course, collapses, for the fetus's right to life is then guaranteed specifically by the 14th Amendment. The portion of the 14th Amendment that he was referring to, the Equal Protection Clause, was passed in 1868, following the Civil War, and it says no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. When a classroom of children is killed on the East Coast, we all recoil in horror. When 96 horses die in the cold, we are all saddened. Each week in Fargo, 25 unborn persons are deprived of their right to life. That's a classroom of children eliminated every week, 100 per month, 1,200 per year, times 40 years. That's 50,000 people in these 40 years, enough to populate a major city in our state. Senate Concurrent Resolution 4009 is important to protect not only the unborn, but people in every condition of life. When the headlines proclaim that smokers and the obese may not be able to receive health care coverage under the new health care plan, we once again see special categories being set in place for discrimination. When people talk about the costs of health care for the elderly or for Alzheimer's patients, We see the need to protect human beings at any stage of development. This amendment is intended to present a direct challenge to Roe v. Wade. By passage of this amendment, the people of North Dakota are asking government to recognize what science already defined. In 1973, perhaps the members of the Supreme Court didn't know when life began. Now, irrefutable proof from DNA has shown scientists that each human being's unique characteristics are determined at the moment of conception. The Supreme Court has ruled that states may find more expansive rights to protect their citizens than those outlined in the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. This Human Life Amendment provides for a more expansive right to the people in this state, saying that in North Dakota, the right to life is upheld for all persons. This Human Life Amendment will proclaim to other states and to the federal government that in North Dakota, the people have decided the inalienable right to life of every human being at any stage of development must be recognized and protected. The committee voted 4-3, do pass, and I urge you to concur.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Senator Triplett.
Mr. President, the carrier of the bill used the phrase from our current North Dakota Constitution suggesting that all of our citizens are equally free and independent. I think that's probably true with regard to all of our citizens after the point of birth. It is absolutely not true before a child is born. A child in utero is dependent on the life of another person. And I think that so long as this proposed amendment does not make some consideration for the life already in existence of the woman who is carrying the child, that we have no business putting this question before the people of North Dakota. There is so much vagueness in this statement that I think people will not be able to understand in advance what it means, what it will mean. I was not on the committee that heard the testimony, so I can't speak as eloquently as I'm sure some of the committee members can, but certainly in the discussions around here in recent days, we've heard people talking about the very difficult situations that pregnant women sometimes face. One of the examples I've heard of is someone who learns that she has cancer while she's also pregnant, and that she faces a choice of receiving treatment for her cancer, which then may cause a miscarriage or other damage to the fetus, or she can have an abortion and receive cancer treatment. It is not for government to make the choice as between the unborn child and the fully formed adult woman who may have a loving husband in her household, who may have other children who are dependent upon her. These are very difficult choices. People who want to have children badly may sometimes be put in that kind of a very difficult choice where they are obliged to make decisions that would wrench at the heartstrings of any one of us in this room. But until science figures out how to grow babies from the petri dish to delivery outside of a woman's womb, I do not think we have any business putting forward an amendment like this. These pre-born children, fetuses, embryos, whatever you want to call them, are not independent human beings. They are dependent on the willingness of a living woman to give them safe harbor. We should be passing bills and resolutions that provide for the care of pregnant women, that provide prenatal care for everyone. We should be providing bills that offer housing to unmarried young women who find themselves pregnant and can't take care of themselves. We should be increasing the amount of money that we are spending for women who find themselves addicted to drugs or alcohol or nicotine and turn up pregnant. There are many, many, many ways that government can and should assist pregnant women to carry to term healthy babies who are wanted and loved, and then we as the state should make sure that they are cared for and loved for the rest of their lives. But we do not have the right to tell a pregnant woman that she has to die because she happens to be pregnant when she gets ill.
Further discussion? Senator Miller.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I just want to remind the body that a child that's out of the womb for a day, even a year, is just as dependent upon the people around them for life. And I also would comment that any woman that's in need of necessary medical treatment in order to survive should receive that treatment, and everyone believes that, because without the mother, there is no baby. And we need to protect the mother and protect the life of that mother. And this amendment, I don't think, inhibits that at all.
Senator Nelson.
Mr. President, yesterday we had a long discussion over what meant to be protected. This morning in the GVA committee, we had a bill concerning veterans who return. And quite frankly, I found the statistics to be unbelievable, because we certainly are not doing our job in protection. Last year, 25 returning veterans committed suicide. 25. That's almost the same number of the young children that died in Connecticut. Over the previous 10 years, 220 have died. PTSD. We certainly are not doing our job at protection. This bill says any stage of development, and we develop for a very long time, from the times of in vitro for some parents who can't deliver any other way, or by regular conception by some of us who could, through until our dying days and the actual time of death. We as a state are not, I believe, recognizing or protecting all those people along the way. And personally, I don't think this kind of thing belongs in our Constitution. I would encourage a no vote.
Further discussion? Senator Mathern.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. I appreciate the eloquent comments on the part of the senator from Bismarck and the senator from Grand Forks. And I think they both raise important questions for all of us in terms of our ideology, our beliefs. But there are also practical considerations before us in this bill. And I would suggest that there is a couple that suggest we vote no on this bill. One is the wording. The wording is not an appropriate manner to take on Roe versus Wade, if that is the intent. There are many legal scholars who have worked on that issue. This is not the way to do it. The timing, I felt it was unfortunate that the matter was amended to put this on the general ballot. Essentially, it's going to get convoluted with all kinds of elections for individuals in the next general election, if this is on the ballot. it really should be or should have been on the primary ballot when there are more folks that focus in on an issue. But the other concern I have is the matter of us as a deliberative body. We take a whole interim to try to figure out whether we should change the tax 1% or 2%, whether or not a chiropractor should be covered under a health care plan. In fact, in health care policies, we say you not only have to have an interim committee study, you have to have it introduced to a committee, to a committee, to a committee before it can come to the Senate floor. And we do that because we want to do it right. Here we have the essence of our existence. And we have a bill that came forward with no such process. I have been involved in pro-life legislation, in pro-life caucus work my entire career. I had no advanced discussion about this matter. I just think there are important issues here that require much more deliberative discussion than a short introduction in a short legislative session in a short afternoon decision in the Senate floor. Mr. President, members of the Senate, I will be voting no on Senate Concurrent Resolution 4009.
Senator City.
Mr. President, I'd like to address each of those 3 points. As to wording, the inalienable right to life, the words come from our Declaration of Independence. Human being, the reason human being is used is because that is the phrase used in the North Dakota Constitution under the Declaration of Rights. And when we're talking about being developed at any stage of development, let me see, every human being at any stage of development must be recognized and protected. We're not talking about some detailed wording that needed to be worked out by a number of people. We are talking about the very essence, the very foundation, the very core of what we believe. And indeed, those are the principles that we want to enshrine in our Constitution. When you talk about timing, I would agree. In committee, I voted for the primary. I didn't win that vote. But then as I got to thinking about it, the general election will be absolutely perfect because the next general election does not have a U.S. Senate race. It does not have a gubernatorial race. It has a race for Congress, and it has Attorney General and some other statewide offices, but it will not be, the airways will not be completely full. And so people will have an opportunity to hear advertising on both sides of this issue. And you know, when you talk also about process, I think you need to realize that each senator has a right to bring forth and put before the body wording that they believe to be important. Justice Antonin Scalia, in the handout that was provided at your desk, has told the states in opinion after opinion that the Supreme Court is waiting for the states to act on this issue. Now is our time, and this is the bill to do it. I urge you to vote yes on Senate Concurrent Resolution 4009.
Is there any further discussion? Further discussion. Senator Grabinger.
Mr. President, I wasn't going to rise on this, but I think it's very important that I do. The problem I have with this is if this goes through, this is going to have severe consequences for many young women across our state. Not only that, and I'll give you my opinion, I'm opposed to abortion except in the case of rape, incest, and the life of the mother, much like many of you. But you got to look at this bill and where it states the stage of development. You have to realize that that's what they're talking about is in a petri dish all the way to the end of life when our families have to make those decisions whether to keep somebody plugged in or not. All of a sudden, we're going to have the state stepping in and saying, you can't do that, because that's protected. That life is still protected. You can't make those decisions anymore. Personally, I wouldn't have been able to make the decisions I did, along with my wife and my doctors, after we had our child, through the in vitro process, gestational carrier process. We decided to terminate the leftover embryos because we weren't going to use them. We weren't going to go through the process anymore. We were graced with my daughter, a miracle. I don't want you to do that to anybody else. And I ask you to vote no on this proposed resolution. I think it's written wrong.
Senator City.
Mr. President, we have gone through more scaremongering on this issue than most people would ever face in the entire session. And what the previous speaker is talking about is completely untrue. The next legislative assembly will come back and will write very specific enabling legislation if it is needed. And I just absolutely cannot understand how anyone can come up with the far-reaching examples that he's proposing. I urge you to vote yes.
Any further discussion on Senate Concurrent Resolution 4009? Hearing none, we'll proceed by way of recorded roll call vote on final passage of Senate Concurrent Resolution 4009. Would the Secretary please open the key? All senators have voted. Any senator wishing to change their vote? Secretary, close the key. The final tally on Senate Concurrent Resolution 4009 reveals there are 26 senators voting yea, 21 senators voting nay. The resolution is adopted. Continuing on the 11th order of business, next matter for consideration under the 11th order, Senate Bill 2303. Mr. Secretary.
Senate Bill number 2303 has a fiscal note. A bill for an act to create and enact a new section to the code relating to application of sections in Chapter 12 to certain medical procedures and to amend sections of the code relating to the definition of human being and the application of sections in Chapter 12 to certain medical procedures. The fiscal note for the 013-15 biennium under general funds, expenditures $60,000, appropriations $60,000.
Senator Gravinger.
Mr. President, your Judiciary Committee recommends a no vote on Senate Bill 2303. The amendments approved on the 6th order yesterday for this bill is essentially the same as House Bill 1450 from last session. As the Secretary noted, this bill regulates certain medical procedures and provides a legal definition for a human being, an individual member of the Homo sapiens species at every stage of development, essentially what I just argued a few moments ago. Mr. President, this proposed definition would have ramifications throughout the code and stands to affect North Dakota citizens in highly personal ways. Your Judiciary Committee heard testimony from physicians who treat women facing complications during pregnancy, such as ectopic pregnancies. These physicians believe this bill would prevent them from performing the procedures necessary to protect the lives and health of their patients, our wives, sisters, daughters. The definition contained in this bill would also have ramifications at the end of life, as I told in the earlier bill, where families are sometimes asked to make the agonizing decisions about whether to undertake further care or let a loved one rest. Now, if I may indulge this body for a moment to share my personal point of view, my opinion regarding this issue of abortion is clear, as I mentioned in the previous statement. But this bill is larger than that emotional issue. If this legislature would have adopted these bills 18 years ago, that young, vibrant, blonde gal, my daughter, who sat next to me right here just a little over a week ago in this chamber, wouldn't be here. She is the love of my life. She is also the reason that I stand to reject this bill and its efforts to stand between doctors and young, hopeful families who, by God's grace, have the opportunity to bring life into this world and the joy of family to so many. For the families made whole by the assistance of these professionals, I ask it that you follow the Judiciary Committee's recommendation and do not pass this bill. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Senator City.
Mr. President, the definition of human being that you'll see on page 3 of this bill, and let me read it for you. Human being means an individual member of the species Homo sapiens at every stage of development, is wording that is used in the Abortion Control Act. So in other words, we define what a human being is in the Abortion Control Act, and then we go ahead and we define how you may kill it. And now we are taking that very same language that is used throughout the Century Code in different places, and we are putting that language in the criminal code. And we are saying human being means an individual member of the species Homo sapiens at every stage of development, and you may not kill it. As for the ludicrous claims that someone's daughter couldn't be here, I worked through 16 various amendments last session. This is the exact bill that was before the body last session. And in working with the senator from the northeastern part of the state on amendment after amendment, we sat down with the in vitro fertilization doctors from Fargo, and they agreed with every single one of the amendments in Section 2 and Section 3. This bill is exactly the bill that you saw before you last session, except it does not have the controversial rape incest exception that we were debating when the bill was tabled. And I urge you to vote for this bill.
Further discussion on final passage of Senate Bill 2303. Senator Mathern.
Mr. President, may we please go to the sixth order for the purpose of amendment?
Without objection, the Senate will be on the sixth order for purposes of an amendment. Senator Mathern.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, on your desk you will find Amendment 13.8250.03001, and on the eighth order I move that amendment.
Are there any senators who do not have a copy of the proposed amendment just articulated on by Senator Mathern? Anyone not have that? Senator Mathern.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. The amendment that you have before you addresses three matters of care for women and children. One of the issues that's before us is the challenge of health care when a woman is pregnant. This amendment in the first section clarifies that as a state we will use every program available to us as a match in Medicaid to make sure women and children are eligible for health care during the time of pregnancy and delivery. It goes further and says in the next section that the next form of care, if Medicaid is not available, we want to make sure that health insurance is available. And then it goes further and says if Medicaid and health insurance is not available, then we as a state will make sure that health care is provided for labor and delivery. The amendments before you are to suggest to the people of our state and to tell all women and families that the state of North Dakota is behind you if you are pregnant. We are there to support you in any circumstance. And the bill that we have before you came as an abortion-related bill. Now it's kind of an in vitro fertilization bill, or it might have other kinds of issues in it. But behind all of those issues is the concern. One of the major concerns of families is health care. So ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I ask you to adopt this amendment. This amendment sets the public policy clear in our state that if you are pregnant, we are there to help you and support you. I ask for a yes vote on this amendment.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2303. Senator Judy Lee.
Mr. President, I ordinarily wouldn't support an amendment of this sort, but this is absolutely such a clear demonstration of where the division is. Some of the people who most passionately support the requirement that every woman have a baby regardless of what the medical conditions are, no matter what else, are also some of the people who are most adamant about not providing any support for that mother and child once the baby is here. We give drug education to kids so that they won't use drugs. We give smoking education to kids so they won't smoke. We teach them that they shouldn't drink because that's a health risk. But perish the thought we should permit any sex education, that we should have any availability to family planning, or that we should provide any help for young or at-risk moms. In the last legislative session, the senator from Lair, whom I happen to know is a very strong pro-life person, stood up in this body and said, when we were addressing a bill that would have raised modestly the eligibility, income eligibility for Medicaid coverage for pregnant women, he said, this is the most important pro-life bill we will look at during our session. What could be more important to this issue than healthy moms and babies? We defeated it because we are, by golly, not going to put any extra money in there. We're going to punish that woman who sinned, if that's the attitude. I shouldn't prejudge anybody. I don't think that's right to do. But I was a little disappointed in that one because if we have healthy moms and babies, that makes a difference. We eliminated home visitations for at-risk moms, for teenage moms, drug-dependent moms who are trying to get their life together, with wonderful outcomes showing that we've had a drop in domestic abuse and neglect reports and admissions to emergency rooms. But we threw that money away, and now, fortunately, there's a not-for-profit who's handling that and providing some assistance to those at-risk moms so that we won't end up having the children who suffer in the end. I think it's terribly important to recognize that this body has done some good things. We have worked for years on enhancing our alternatives to abortion programs. There are really good private entities who also provide support to women who have unintended pregnancies, and their work is invaluable, and I appreciate all that they do. But I think it's really important to recognize the fact that if we don't provide the kind of support that will enable a woman with an unplanned pregnancy to complete that pregnancy and be healthy and have a healthy baby and help her deal with whatever that decision is after that baby arrives, whether it's adoption or keeping the baby herself and supporting her life with that child so that they can both have healthy, productive lives, we are not being very moral and ethical ourselves. So I certainly support this amendment. I think it's important that we provide that kind of support to the women who don't have the a manner of to pay for their own medical care. How else are we going to have an end result of healthy moms and babies? And it presents us again with the opportunity to think about what we're doing to support those babies and their mothers once they're here.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2303. Senator Dever.
Mr. President, I have a question of the sponsor of the amendment, and I'm not real clear whether by expand Medicaid coverage, he's talking about expanding the services provided under Medicaid, or if we're expanding or increasing the eligibility level, and if we are increasing the eligibility level, what is the maximum under federal law?
Senator Mathern, do you wish to answer the question?
Yes, Mr. President and Senator. I had this amendment drafted with the assistance of the Department of Human Services and the Legislative Council. The eligibility has changed somewhat, and it's right now before the Congress again in terms of what that level will be. But I believe there are some programs where it can go as high as 400%. And I believe we are now closer to 133% in our present state. The amendment here does not change the services that are available, so it's not an expansion of the services, but it would be an expansion of the eligibility rate. For example, it might be at 100, and if it's available at 200, this would authorize the department to move it to 200 if that's what the federal government is doing. So it is increasing that eligibility level, not increasing the number of services, for example, whether it covers dental or no dental. It's more a matter of the eligibility. But the general amendment goes beyond that. The amendment in total says all of that doesn't matter in North Dakota. What matters is if you are pregnant, you will be supported. You will be given help if you need help. So it essentially, by the two sections, eliminates that question about am I eligible or not eligible. It just says if you are a woman, if you need health care, and you don't have insurance, and you don't have Medicaid, we will cover you for pregnancy and delivery.
Further discussion, Senator Sorvag.
Mr. President, I got a question for the senator from District 11, the sponsor. It says pregnant women, and I'm not familiar with this area of the code at all, and there isn't time to look, but is the intention or where it's being placed, is that limiting it to women that are residents of the state of North Dakota, or how is that being separated out?
Senator Mather, do you wish to answer the question?
Yes. The intent here, and the way it is written, is we would follow our present guidelines regarding residency. So yes, this is for residents of North Dakota.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment, Senator Dever.
Well, Mr. President, I'd like to thank the sponsor for his explanation, and I'd just like to point out a couple of other things that might be of interest to the body. And first of all, when we're talking about Medicaid coverage for pregnant women, that does not expand the Medicaid coverage to general Medicaid coverage. It only is for the purpose of that pregnancy. And of interest also to me, when we had the bill before, and that would have expanded the eligibility from 133% of poverty to 200%, I asked the question, for eligibility purposes, is a pregnant woman one person or two? And the answer is two. So I think it's important to know that we recognize in that program that an unborn baby is a human being.
Any further discussion on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2303? Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed by way of recorded roll call vote. The Secretary, please open the key. All senators have voted. Any senator wishing to change their vote, Secretary, close the key. Final tally on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2303 reveals there are 30 senators voting yea, 17 senators voting nay. The amendment is adopted. That was on the amendment, Senator Murphy. It'll be noted in the record, Senator Murphy's vote is green.
Mr. President?
Senator Lee.
Yes, my vote should have been yes as well. I was digging for the income eligibility chart in my drawer and bumped the wrong button.
The record will reflect Senator Lee as a yay. Senator Judy Lee as a yay. Okay, back to the 11th order. Continuing the discussion on Senate Bill 2303, now as amended by the amendment previously entitled 13-8250.03001. Senator Grabinger.
Mr. President, I think it's important that I stand and call into question my integrity was put to a question here a few moments ago, and I just want to say that I'm not going to argue that point, but I want to make it clear because a statement was made
Senator
that is
Murphy,
not true.
Senator Grabinger, your comments are out of order at this point.
Mr. President, if I may, there was a statement made that was untrue, and I just want to clear up my point of view that the statement, what the statement is.
Senator Grabinger, your comments need to be constrained to the debating of the bill, Senate 2303, as amended.
Mr. President, this does affect the bill. The statement was made that the doctors who perform in vitro in the state approved of the bill as it was written, and I have proof that they haven't. I just wanted the chamber to know that.
Further discussion on Senate Bill 2303, now as amended. Senator City.
Mr. President, I was in the room with the in vitro doctors and the senator from District 10 on repeated occasions when we negotiated these amendments.
Further discussion? Senate Bill 2303 as amended. Senator Triplett.
Mr. President, may we be on the sixth order for purpose of an amendment?
Without objection, the Senate will be on the sixth order for purposes of an amendment. Senator Triplett.
Mr. President, I move Amendment 13.8250.03002. I believe everyone has a copy.
Are there any senators who do not have a copy of the proposed amendment just stated by Senator Triplett? Anyone not have a copy? Senator Triplett.
Mr. President, this amendment is identical to the one offered to an earlier bill. It simply appropriates $1 million or so much of the sum as may be necessary from the general fund in order to support the Attorney General's office in litigating this bill should it pass. Again, for the record, I will state my comments individually since this is a separate bill. All of these bills clearly will go to litigation. There is just no question about that. And I think that the only responsible way to do government is to acknowledge the costs of what we are doing. And if we are going to push the limits of the law, I think that we owe it to ourselves and our constituents to understand up front that we are willing to pay the price for defending the laws. The attorneys who represent the state have no choice but to step up and defend laws when they are challenged. It's part of their duties as members of the executive branch of government. If we ask them to defend laws, knowing when we pass them that there is a question about their constitutionality, I think that we are doing a disservice to ourselves and to that office if we don't finance the lawsuits. The $1 million is obviously an estimate. There's no way of knowing, how far a lawsuit would go, whether it would be dismissed early on or whether it would go on for some period of time. But certainly, it would get them started. We have sister states who are already into this situation. A quick internet review will tell you that other states are in the process of budgeting $1 to $2 million per biennium to defend lawsuits that are already ongoing. So I think this is not an unreasonable dollar amount. I saw one estimate that a state is estimating that they may spend up to $4 million defending a similar bill. So I think we have to start somewhere, and I think $1 million is a reasonable place to start. I would urge that you support this, and if you don't support this, then I think you don't really have much right to complain if our Attorney General's office doesn't do a very aggressive job of defending the case, because they obviously have a whole lot of other obligations to do, taking care of all the rest of state government. And I think the way lawsuits of this sort are generally handled in our state is that they are contracted out to private attorneys, and private attorneys don't accept cases like this unless they have some guarantee of payment. So I think this is just a rational addition to bills like this. It's not an attempt to say there's anything wrong with the bill necessarily. It's just an attempt to do good government and to be upfront about what it is we are doing. And by the way, we probably have the money in the general fund right now to afford this. So I would urge you to vote in favor of this amendment.
Is there any further discussion on this proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2303 as amended? Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed by way of recorded roll call vote. Would the Secretary please open the key? All senators have voted. Any senator wishing to change their vote? Secretary, close the key. The final tally on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2303, as already amended, reveals there are 19 senators voting yea, 28 senators voting nay. This amendment fails. Back to the 11th order, continuing to debate Senate Bill 2303 as previously amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed by way of recorded roll call vote. The Secretary, please open the key. All senators have voted. Any senator wishing to change their vote? Secretary, close the key. Final tally on Senate Bill 2303 as amended reveals there are 25 senators voting yea, 22 senators voting nay. The bill is passed. Continuing on the 11th order, next matter, Senate
Mr.
Bill
President.
Senator Klein.
Mr. President, I'd move that Senate Bill 2303 now be re-referred to appropriations.
Question is on the motion of Senator Klein. It's been seconded. As many as are in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Senate Bill 2303 will be sent to Senate re-referred to Senate Appropriations. Okay, continuing back to the 11th order, Senate Bill 2302. Mr. Secretary.
Senate Bill number 2302 has a fiscal note, a bill for an act to provide for an ethical treatment of human embryos and provide a penalty, the fiscal note, for the 013-15 biennium under general funds. Expenditures $60,000, appropriations $60,000.
Senator Grabinger.
Mr. President, your Judiciary Committee recommends a no vote on Senate Bill 2302. After the amendments approved on the 6th order yesterday, this bill has been hoghoused. As it stands, Mr. President, the bill sets forth a variety of definitions in Section 1 related to the treatment of human embryos. Likewise, Section 2 sets forth various standards regarding the treatment of these embryos. Section 3 prohibits a person from giving or receiving valuable consideration for the provision of gametes or in vitro human embryos. Section 4 requires identification of human embryos by a medical facility and imposes record-keeping requirements on these facilities. Importantly, Mr. President, Section 5 of the bill defines a human embryo as a biological human being and institutes a high duty of care to the living in vitro human embryo owed by medical professionals to the embryo. Section 6 prescribes a judicial standard, the best interests of the in vitro human embryo for resolving disputes between any parties regarding an in vitro human embryo. Section 7 provides for criminal penalties for those who violate the standards set forth in this bill. And finally, Section 8 makes a declaration of legislative intent. While the committee received testimony in support of this bill from the sponsor, we were not able to receive testimony from the public on the version of the bill presently under consideration here in the chamber due to the hoghouse tactics employed at the committee level. Previously, however, the committee heard significant concerns from medical doctors who practice and treat married couples facing infertility. They believe that this legislation would essentially end their ability to provide care for these patients and help bring healthy babies into the world to parents who stand ready to welcome them with open arms. For that reason and others, Mr. President, your Judiciary Committee recommends that the Senate vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion on Senate Bill 2302? Any further discussion? Senator Mathern.
Thank you, Mr. President. May we please be on the sixth order for the purpose of amendment.
Without objection, the Senate will be on the sixth order for purposes of an amendment, proposed amendment. Senator Mathern.
Mr. President, on the eighth order, then, I move Amendment 13.8 to 31.03001.
Are there any senators who do not have a copy of the proposed amendment just stated by Senator Mathern? Senator Sinner needs a copy. All senators now have a copy. Senator Mathern.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not quite sure why the Judiciary Committee sent bills which appear to be quite similar. But as I reviewed them, it appeared necessary that we have this discussion about what are we doing to assist people who are struggling with the issues of health care. So on this bill, this amendment, we are considering that issue. One of the challenges that families have, and particularly women have, is, do I have health care to deal with the health care? Do I have health care coverage to deal with the health care I need for prenatal care and delivery? This amendment, if you look at Section 9, expands Medicaid coverage for pregnant women to the maximum allowed by federal law. The intent of the amendment is to take advantage of the federal dollars that are available to us to match state and county dollars with our present array of coverage, but at that highest matching rate, and make that available to people in our state. In Section 10, there is a further elaboration that if a woman, family, does not have insurance coverage, they would also be covered. So passage of these amendments on this bill would set the public policy of our state that no matter what your financial situation, we have established the policy that the state of North Dakota will help you get health care coverage for your prenatal care and your delivery. Mr. President, you're a person that has children. Most of us have children or grandchildren. And when a pregnancy is part of our family situation, a key ingredient is health care. Some years ago, I went to see the director of the abortion clinic and asked her, what are some of the key indicators that move people to such an agonizing decision? She told me that one was access to health care and whether or not one was being supported with some sort of health care coverage. This amendment, I ask you, no matter where you're at on the ideological question, whether you are pro-choice or pro-life or whatever labels we use in our culture, no matter what it is, let's get behind people who are in this situation. Let's make sure that that variable is clear to them. If they are residents of North Dakota, they are supported in terms of health care while they are in pregnancy or delivery. Mr. President, members of the Senate, I ask for a yes vote on this amendment for 2302.
Any further discussion on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2302? Senator Kilzer.
Mr. President, this amendment has nothing to do with the subject of this bill. It is a diversionary tactic. It is a tactic to kill the bill basically by fiscal note. And I would urge that we defeat the amendment that is being proposed.
Senator Miller.
Never mind.
Any further discussion on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2302? Senator Mathern.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I believe we have an opportunity to be positive, to be supportive. I plan to vote yes on this amendment. I plan to vote yes on this bill. This is not a diversionary tactic. This is to be clear to the women and families of our state. We are supportive, and I ask you to please vote yes on these amendments.
Any further discussion on the proposed amendment? Further discussion? Hearing none, the question is on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2302. We'll proceed by way of recorded roll call vote. Secretary, please open the key. All senators have voted. Any senator wishing to change their vote? Secretary, close the key. Final tally on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2302 reveals there are 21 senators voting yea, 26 senators voting nay. The amendment is defeated. Back to the 11th order, Senate Bill 2302. Is there any further discussion? Senator Triplett.
May we be on the sixth order for purposes of an amendment?
Without objection, the Senate will be on the 6th order. Do all senators, never mind. Senator Triplett.
Mr. President, I move Amendment 13.8231.03002.
Are there any senators who do not have a copy of the proposed amendment just stated by Senator Triplett? You may proceed, Senator Triplett.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sometimes when people don't understand me, if I talk too fast and they don't hear my last name, I clarify it by saying one of three. Triplet, one of three. This is one of three, and then I'll be done with this series. This is the same amendment as I offered on two previous bills today to put an appropriation onto the bill to acknowledge the fact that we are stepping off into territory that will surely be challenged in a court of law. And as I said on the previous two bills, it is the responsibility of our legal team who work for the state to step up and defend what we do here. And I think that we should not lightly pass bills knowing that they are on the edge without offering the resources to pay for them. As I said previously, I know I'm being a little repetitive here, but since these are separate bills, I think it's worth saying again. The usual procedure, as I understand it, in our state is that for lawsuits of this sort, our Attorney General's office hires outside counsel because they simply don't have the time or the resources to devote to separate bills of this sort. Certainly they're involved, but they hire outside counsel because the Attorney General's office has a huge responsibility in our state to represent all of the agencies of the executive branch. And I think if as a body we're going to be passing bills like this and not providing the resources to defend the laws after they're passed, that we better not complain if the defense is a little light. We cannot ask our attorneys to stand up and divert large amounts of resources to defending bills like this if we haven't given them the resources. So I would encourage a yes vote on this amendment. I think it's the only rational thing to do if you intend to vote yes for the bill.
Is there any further discussion on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2302? Senator Nelson.
Mr. President, just a reminder that not only do we have funds to defend this bill should it pass, but should we lose that defense of our bill, we will be probably responsible for all the expenses of the other side. And we were told in one of our committees that legal fees currently for people of that caliber are $400 to $500 per hour.
Any further discussion on this proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2302? Hearing none, the question is on the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 2302. We will proceed by way of recorded roll call vote. Would the Secretary please open the key? All senators have voted. Any senator wishing to change their vote? Secretary, close the key. Final tally on Senate Bill 2302 reveals there are 18 senators voting yea, 29 senators voting nay. The bill is lost, or the proposed amendment is lost, rather. Back to the 11th order, still on Senate Bill 2302. Senator City.
Mr. President, this bill is part of the original bill that was introduced. I called this bill in committee the shrinking bill because it started out much more expansive than what you see before you. And I have listened, others have listened to the concerns of the in vitro doctors, and we totally have removed the sections that are dealing with the actual fertilization. And we're you know, there's so much hype that's been out there. I just want to walk you briefly through the bill. And, you know, Section 2 is just talking about the ethical treatment of human embryos. The central question here is, what is a human embryo? Were you once a human embryo? And perhaps you were tucked in the safety of your mother's womb, but not all human embryos are. And so it's updating cloning information. Very similar. The last time North Dakota looked at its cloning bill was 9 years ago. Since that time, Cornell University has developed a glow-in-the-dark human being by combining genes from an iridescent or translucent jellyfish with a human being. We don't want that happening in North Dakota. There's so many other examples there, but this is not anything that anyone would object to. This is just taking care that we do have one human egg united with one human sperm and going into one human body for infertility treatment, and that we're not doing anything else that's weird in any way in this state. Section 3 is prohibiting the sale of eggs and sperm. They can still be donated, but we don't want people advertising, as they are on so many university campuses, that people of a certain IQ and hair color and height should donate their eggs. And then some of the times these young women don't realize what they're doing. If you really cared about the health and safety of young women, you would understand the importance of this, because women have wound up sterile and they have died. When we look at Section 4, all we're asking is that for every in vitro human being that is, every human embryo, that it has an identification to it. We don't want the situation in California where there were one fertility doctor fathered 500 children, and all these half-siblings are running around and marrying and not understanding what their lineage is. Those records are going to be kept confidential. But it is important that those records be kept somewhere. And Section 6, the judicial standard, we already say that a fetus has inheritance rights. People are wondering about that. We already say that you can appoint a guardian ad litem for a fetus. And so this is just saying that if there's a dispute between husband and wife, if in case of a divorce, that the best interests of the human embryo be considered. And then the penalties are Class B misdemeanor. We're talking about human life here. So many people are so concerned about $1 million for a lawsuit. But I have to ask you, what is the value of your life? What is the value of any human life? And what is the value of hundreds of thousands of human lives, of human embryos that will be created through in vitro in your lifetime and in the lifetimes of your children? This bill has nothing to do with abortion. This bill, and so some of the arguments and some people talking about tactics employed. There's no tactic employed here. This bill is nothing to be afraid of. This bill is talking about protecting all human lives, and I urge you to vote for its passage.
Is there any further discussion on the final passage of Senate Bill 2302? Senator Judy Lee.
Mr. President, I wasn't part of the committee that reviewed these bills, and I have great confidence in all of our committees who give lots of attention and detailed discussion for all of the bills that are before each of our committees. And in this case, the Judiciary Committee has recommended do not pass on this. I just have a couple of observations that I think are kind of important. There are people of faith who are in a variety of different positions on these 4 bills. And I think that that's an important thing to note. I also know that some of us think that God permitted great medical discoveries to be available because of the intellect which we have been given as a divine gift to determine all kinds of cures and treatments and innovative medical science that, frankly, means I'm standing in front of you and I otherwise wouldn't be. I'm grateful for that remarkable advance that there's been in medical science over the years. But I think it's important to think about the fact I have never seen so many messages from people I don't know with photographs of the beautiful children they have as a result of in vitro fertilization, pleading not to have this miracle denied to them, denied to others that has been provided for them. People I don't know who are sharing their most private and intimate information. It's none of our business whether somebody had their family through in vitro fertilization or some other means. One of the physicians involved with the fertility clinic in Fargo told me that in almost every case, I don't recall if he said every, but I know he said almost every case, the family uses those embryos. They like those families. One of the people who sent me a message is awaiting the birth of her 3rd child. They have 2 other embryos. They plan to use them as well. They care about this because it's an expensive, invasive, unpleasant, psychologically challenging process to go through, and the people who really want these children have been willing to do this in order to move forward. I just wanted to mention one thing that kind of ties in with all 4 of these, actually. In our Human Services Committee this week, one of the bills that we considered was funding for the Children's Advocacy Centers. These remarkable workers at these centers interview, examine, and treat children who have been victims of abuse, including sexual abuse. One of the providers told me a couple of years ago that she would sit with these children, and on occasion excuse herself, and go down the hall and throw up and come back and visit with this child again because of the terrible things that are happening. One of the people this week told us the challenge of dealing with a 12-year-old who is pregnant with her brother's child. Now, I'm not saying that child should have an abortion. I'm just saying this isn't always a terribly black and white issue. All of these bills are dealing with people who want to have babies and people who might be pregnant at an unexpected time. And the kind of things that need to be done are such a totally personal, private decision between the family members and the physician. And as the senator from Williston said, God, I don't think that those of us sitting in this body have the right to make that kind of decision for anybody. And I also know that the fertility clinic in Fargo doesn't do any of these outrageous things that have been mentioned as examples. They are remarkably professional. The things they do are all more than fulfilling the law as far as the way the embryos are kept. If anybody wants to know more about it, it's real easy to get that information. But to suggest that there's anything untoward going on because of wild and crazy stories about what's going on someplace else is unfair to tar them with that brush. So I do hope that you will consider voting against 2302, which is the recommendation of the committee that we have trusted to look at these bills very carefully and permit this service to be available to the families who really would like to have children and will be loving, wonderful parents. Please vote no on 2302.
Further discussion, Senator City.
Mr. Chairman, in no way have I cast any aspersions upon the fine work that is done at the medical center in Fargo, and I want to make that abundantly clear. I also want to make it abundantly clear that that clinic is going to be able to operate just as it always has, and this bill is not going to be limiting them. We've taken out those sections that regulate fertilization.
Any further discussion on final passage of Senate Bill 2302? Hearing none, the question will be on the final passage of Senate Bill 2302. Would the Secretary please open the key? All senators have voted. Any senator wishing to change their vote? Secretary, close the key. Final tally on Senate Bill 2302 reveals there are 18 senators voting yea, 29 senators voting nay. The bill is lost.